Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. It is a Fights in Football Friday with some hockey. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you guys who are tuning in on Twitch for hanging out today. I've admittedly had some trouble with the Twitch chat on OBS, which I use here. The latest technical issue, although not as much of a hindrance as the stuff we had last week. So, I've tried something else. So if y'all could let me know if there are any sync issues throughout the day or anything like that, it would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, coming up on the show, we are going to look at fantasy football, getting all of your fantasy football questions in and all of those things. Plus, going to be previewing every game in the NFL and the CFL. We got some NHL preview stuff off the top, and then it's a whole lot of fight talk as we look at fights to make coming out of UFC 306 or Noche UFC. Plus, who should Canelo face next? If you guys followed the previews last week, you know where I'm going with that. And then we have the fights coming up this weekend that I want to do just a quick preview on. I feel like this one's going to be a bit of a long one anyway, so not going to go as in depth on the fight previews this week as we did last week. So yes, all of that is coming up on the show today. Thank you guys so much for stopping in, and yeah, it should be a very, very fun show as we kind of go along today. Let's start with some hockey talk. All right, it is another edition of our NHL preview as we get ready for the start of the NHL season. And look, every team comes in saying they are the one that, like, this is our year, it's Stanley Cup or bust, here we go, we got this, this is our year. We know only a few mean that, though, right? We have an understanding, like, they're talking in Calgary about, yeah, you know, I think we can surprise some people. Will you? We'll see. But there are some teams who that's legitimate. It is Stanley Cup or bust. And there are even more teams who have a lot of pressure on them coming into this season. And so today, going to be looking at the teams that need the Stanley Cup the most. Which teams need to win this year? Obviously, I feel like a lot of teams, want to win and all of those things. But who needs this one the most? I have a poll up right now, so you guys can get that voting going and all of those things. But let's get into it now. Honorable mention to the Carolina Hurricanes. This is a team that I feel like they have underperformed in the postseason the last couple of years. I do only have them as an honorable mention simply because they are a team that lost quite a few pieces in this offseason. And so I think the pressure to do well, even though I put their coach on the hot seat on the last preview episode that we did on Wednesday, I do think that this is a team that probably has a little bit of wiggle room. So, coming in at number 5, the team that needs it the most this year in the NHL, it's the Boston Bruins. The Bruins are a team that long, proud history, all of those things. But it's been a minute since they were a Stanley Cup contender in, the late rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs and things like that. They have gone out and made some big acquisitions, acquisitions that people in Calgary are going to be very familiar with, right? When you bring in Nikita Zadorov and you bring in a Elias Lindholm, you are not doing that just so the long-term stability of this organization. You are wanting to win now because those contracts, just I hate to tell you, those contracts aren't going to look awesome in the next couple of years. And so when you have the Boston Bruins, who haven't been out of the second round since they lost to the St. Louis Blues back in 2019, I think there's some pressure on here. And I think that this is a team that is going to try to come out and really make a statement. Again, I think it gets ugly. We're also in the latter stages of Brad Marchand and in the latter stages of, well, not latter stages, I guess. I was going to say of Pasternak. I don't think that's accurate, actually. But Marchand, he is on the back part of his career, still playing very effectively, but still in the back part of his career. And so I think when you combine all of those forces, it leads to must-win territory for the Boston Bruins. So they are the team that needs it the 5th most, in my opinion, in the NHL. At 4, it's the New York Rangers. I have said before, I like this Rangers team a lot. Panarin is legitimately one of my favorite players in the NHL, and Mika Zibanejad, you know, ditto. And so, like, there are pieces on this team that I really, really, really like. But I do also have some concerns, again, about maybe a lack of playoff success. This has been one of the best teams in the league for a minute now, and it still hasn't really clicked in the way that they would want it to. If we're going to hold the Boston Bruins record against them, I guess the Rangers, they do make it to the conference finals here this last go around. Actually, you know what? They've been in the conference finals 2 of the last 3 years. Maybe I'm overstating the lack of playoff success. Because before that, they had the first round loss against the Devils. They didn't qualify for the playoffs in 20 and 21. And actually, that was 4 years in a row. They technically didn't qualify for the postseason. So maybe I'm still stuck in that. But either way, their time is now. When you look at having one of the best goaltenders in the league, one of the best players in the league in Artemi Panarin, one of the best defensemen in the league Adam Fox, then all of a sudden, this is a team that I think should be doing a little bit better than they have been and needs to start to really build some things up here. So I do think that there is a lot of pressure on the New York Rangers. The team with the 3rd most amount of pressure on them this year, the Vegas Golden Knights. Hey, Crash Andrews. How's it going? Thanks for joining the chat. And also, I believe we just had an influx of people here. So yes, we're doing a bit of NHL right now, and then we're going to get to the fantasy football in just a second. At number 3, it's the Vegas Golden Knights. They just won the Stanley Cup very, very recently. But I feel like when you run a team the way Vegas does, there is kind of a proof of concept that is needed when you are constantly, hey, Toxic, how's it going? When you are constantly out there moving players and just, okay, well, we traded this for this guy. He is the apple of our eye. This is so nice to see. By the way, we've just traded you to Buffalo, so deal with that. When you are constantly moving players in and out and trying to circumvent things the way they have, which again, totally legal, but when you do that, you do have to continue to win. Vegas did not do that last year. There's pressure on them to do it this year. At 2, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs because they're the Maple Leafs. But also, this is kind of the last dance for this group, which, again, I apologize for continuing to be one of the people who overuses that. And so, oh, thank you, Crash. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that quite a bit. Thank you. For the Leafs, like, again, I said this is the last dance. This is not a team that has had the success even close to the Chicago Bulls. They are to losing what the Bulls were to winning, in the playoffs anyway. But still, this is the last go-around probably for Matthews, Nylander, Marner, and Tavares, and Riley. I think we can all agree on that one as well. So I do think that there is quite a bit of pressure on Toronto this year to find a proof of concept. Listening to the CJ show with CJ and Julian, yes, I still listen to some shows on that network. One. But listening to them, you have they were talking about what would be the funniest thing to happen to your team. And I think they said for the Leafs is like, Marner comes out and has just a blowaway playoffs and this team makes like the Eastern Conference Finals. That would be hilarious. That would be absolutely amazing. I would greatly appreciate that. I think it would be just a whole lot of fun if that was a thing that that ended up happening with them. And so I do think that there is quite a bit of pressure on the Toronto Maple Leafs to try to make something like that happen here this year. And the number 1 team with the most pressure on them is the Edmonton Oilers. They finally make it to the promised land within Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. And wouldn't you know it, they come up just a little bit short. They do, I still think, again, I know, Toxic, I know, that the Oilers, you know, we don't want them to do it, but they kind of need to. When you have Draisaitl, when you have McDavid, when you have a Draisaitl extension coming up that is going to be expensive, and you have a McDavid contract that is coming up that's going to be expensive, there's a lot of pressure to win now. And when you give up on future assets like Holloway and Broberg in the way they did, the pressure is on in Edmonton. I don't think I'm breaking news with that, but the pressure is absolutely 100% on with the Edmonton Oilers. So they are the team that needs it the most in the NHL for the 2024-2025 season. All right, let's continue our roll again. Shout out Crash and Toxic in the chat and Crash with the raid. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Hopefully the ones of you that have stuck around are enjoying things so far. We're going to shift to football now. And admittedly, my predictions didn't go that great last week. But I feel like last week was a weird week. So we're going to bounce back this week as we get into a little bit of football talk, getting ready for week 3 in the NFL. Yes, it was not the best of times. It was mainly the worst of times last week for the NFL predictions around these parts. And so today we are looking at trying to bounce back this week as we did, you know, I've done accountability episodes. And so it's important for me to let you know how we did. We did go 5-13, so it wasn't great. And look, I said not all. I wasn't super stoked on all of those. But those are still some that we got to improve upon a little bit here. So let's see if we can get this thing going and get it back to 500. So for those of you in the chat, will we get to a 500 mark this week? I think I might be using the predictions thing wrong, but if I am, sorry. Either way, let's get into this here. Denver taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs are favored by 6.5 points, and the total is at 40.5. When Denver has the football, it has looked very bad for them on offense so far this season. They have had some brutal turnovers and just been generally ineffective. I have this, so just before we get too far into it, I don't want to get too stat heavy because I think I did a little bit last year, but just a quick explainer of some of the stats that I look at for NFL, and stats that I'm going to be referencing rather regularly here this year for NFL coverage. EPA per play, or EPA per drop back, or EPA per run, is expected points average. And so every time you have the football, there is an expected amount of points that comes with that based off of how people in your same position have done over the last 1 billion years of football. And so if you have the ball at the 20, at your own 20 to start a drive, you are expected to get X amount of points. If you go out and make a 30-yard play that gets you to midfield, well, now, that positioning, you are expected to get Y amount of points. And so the difference in those points is your expected points. They average that out over the game and see how everyone does. It's just kind of a bit more of an effectiveness of the offense. Also, there is success rate that I use. That one is if you get half of the yards to gain on first and second down, and if you get all the yards to gain on third, that is a success. So if you pass the ball for 5 yards on first down and it's 2nd and 5, look at that, we have a successful play. Same thing if you run it. If you run the ball for 2 yards on first down and it's 2nd and 8, that is an unsuccessful play. And then the last one that I use is DVOA. It is just an overall view of a team and an overall look at how efficient a team is, both on the offense and on the defensive side of things. So that's just a quick breakdown. So that's when I'm saying some of these things. Now you know. So Denver offense, bad. They are 31st in EPA per dropback and 30th in passing success rate, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. When you just need a 5-yard pass on first down for a play to be deemed successful, and you are 30th in the NFL in that category, that is really bad. Their overall offense has a success rate of 31.5%. So when just 31% of your plays are being successful, that's a problem. The running game has been an issue in Denver that people have not really been assuming so far. They are 27th in EPA per run, 30th in rushing success rate, so the offense has really quite stalled. They're facing a Tampa Bay defense that I do think has some issues, but according to the stats, it's not great. I do think a lot of that is based off of week 1 and a shootout with Washington. So We don't need to get into all of them because I don't think they really tell the full story. On the Tampa Bay side, when they have the football, Baker has picked up right where he left off last year. This offense is really moving things very effectively and very efficiently. They are 14th in offensive DVOA right now, so middle of the pack, but still being able to move the ball. Denver's defense has actually done quite well. I will caution on that, though. They have played Seattle, and they have played Tennessee. Now, Seattle's offense should be pretty good. Tennessee, just based on the turnovers that they have, not a great offense to start. So there is a little bit of... That's why we're not going super numbers heavy this week or any week. But there are a few concerns about this team and maybe the competition they face so far this year. In terms of Tampa Bay's offense, again, back to them, my concern is that it's pretty one-dimensional. Rachaad White hasn't been very good so far this year, and if you just know Baker's just going to be back there just slinging it, eventually teams are going to pick up on that. But overall, I have Tampa Bay winning this one, and I have Tampa Bay covering -6.5. Into the fantasy conversation about these. I don't know if you can trust anyone on the Denver Broncos. Knicks is absolutely a no, and probably shouldn't even be owned in leagues right now, in redraft leagues anyway. I wouldn't like to have to rely on their running backs. We talked about McLaughlin as a waiver wire ad. That's, not this week. Wouldn't want to be going with that. And that also didn't pay off really last week either. But I do think that he is going to become a bit more part of this offense as it goes along. While Javonte Williams, I think he is quite talented. He just hasn't really shown it so far this year. And so I'm trying to avoid all of those. They have a couple of receivers who have been getting a few targets, but the targets aren't great. So right now, it is a wait and see at best for the Denver Broncos. On the Tampa Bay side, Baker probably isn't a great option this week. I just said that I'm waiting and seeing how good this Denver defense is in a difficult-ish matchup against Tampa Bay. So if you have another option, I would probably go that way. I don't love White again, but given where he was drafted, you probably have to trust him, and that's a problem. For the receivers, Evans and Godwin are studs, and you should probably be starting them every single week. On to the Houston Texans taking on the Minnesota Vikings. The Texans are 2-point favorites with the total sitting at 46. So let's start with when Houston has the ball. It was a little concerning how many issues they had moving the ball against Chicago last week. And I do think that the Bears defense is quite good. And so they are going to give you some problems at times. I don't like how stalled out things got when you don't have Joe Mixon running for 130 yards, but I do still think there's so much talent on this side. I do think that it wins out. Minnesota's defense has been strong to start the season. They rank second in defensive DVOA. They are fourth in defensive EPA and fourth in defensive EPA per dropback. That being said, they face Daniel Jones in week 1, and they face San Francisco without Christian McCaffrey in week 2. I talked about the home field advantage. I do think the defense gets some of that, but I don't know how actually great this defense is moving forward. This will be a very interesting test and a real kind of like, okay, let's see how real is Minnesota coming out of this game, and also how real actually are the Houston Texans. This is sneakily one of the best games of the week, I think. For Minnesota, when they have the ball, the offense has been off to a surprising start this season. And again, they played the Giants in week 1, but they played the 49ers in week 2, and that's a defense that I kind of trust and one that is pretty strong. So I do think that there is a option for this team to actually go out and put up some points here this week against the Houston defense that looked really good against Chicago. They did give up some big plays against Indy, and that's where I'm a little bit concerned. Not that Sam Darnold is a big play machine or anything like that, but I do think that there is some concern here with Sam Darnold, with this Houston offense giving up some of the big plays that they have. But overall, I do think the defense has looked good. They rank 4th in DVOA right now and 8th in defensive EPA per play. So it is a good defense. I don't know if they are as good as Chicago made them seem, where you can just blitz one and all of a sudden it just mass chaos ensues and Chicago doesn't know what the fuck to do with any of that, it becomes a bit of a thing. So we will see how they do there. But my overall pick is Houston -2. I just think they're the more talented team. And I know I could have done that last week, and Minnesota, them being the home side, gave us some pause in going with San Francisco in that matchup. But I do think that this week, Houston, given that they are healthy, are definitely the way to go. From a fantasy football standpoint, by the way, if you guys have any fantasy football questions you want to throw in the chat, I know, like, to say fantasy football expert would be a wild overstatement. But I did host a fantasy football radio show out here in Calgary for 3 years, 2 years, a bit of time anyway. And so I know-ish what I'm doing here. So if you have some fantasy football questions or just need another sounding board for fantasy football stuff, absolutely let me know in the chat. And I will entirely derail the format of the show to help your questions out. From a fantasy standpoint, though, you're starting your Texans this week, right? Like, I don't think you're sitting Stroud. You're not sitting Collins ever. Dell has been off to a bit of a slower start, but if he connects on that 50-yard pass against Chicago, I think we view a lot of things differently, actually. Both the Texans' offense, maybe even Chicago's defense, and a few fantasy options here. And Diggs, I do think you can put him in. The 2 red zone looks that he got in week 1 against Indy still kind of weigh in the mind a little bit. I would stay away from the running back situation if you can. Mixon, we'll see. And even if he is ready to go, Pierce doesn't seem like he's the guy, so it would be Cam Akers, who did seem like he lacked a bit of explosiveness last week. And so I would caution against using him. If you have to, you have to, but I would try to find a different back for you there. Up next, it is the game that everyone is calling the Spider-Man meme, as it is the LA Chargers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are favored by 1 in this game. Oh, and as I'm saying this, because I have Joe Mixon in a lineup, Joe Mixon has been downgraded to doubtful. So, certainly seems like it's Cam Akers in that spot. Hey, I would try to, I would try to not have to use Cam Akers. Also, I'm just realizing now, I forgot to give you the Minnesota side of things. I'm not trusting Sam Darnold as an option unless I have to. Jefferson, if he's healthy, you play him. Aaron Jones, probably a guy you should be starting anyway. Ty Chandler isn't at a point where you have to start him every week, but he is at a point where it's getting a little bit interesting. And if you wanted to, like, if you are in a super deep league and you just want to give it a go, Houston is 23rd in defensive rush success rate, so you can run on them a little bit. They also, like, it's a little bit skewed, right? Because they faced Jonathan Taylor in week 1, one of the best running backs in the league. Now, they faced DeAndre Swift last week. Not a whole lot going on there, and the offensive line isn't a help either. But I do wonder if Ty Chandler is a sneaky play in some deep leagues. On to, again, the Spider-Man meme game. It is the Chargers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are favored by a point, and the total is at an absolutely disgusting 36.5. That is absolutely gross. When the Chargers have the football, look, neither team's going to want to throw this one. The Chargers' run game has been very strong so far this year. They're 5th in rush EPA, or EPA per rush, sorry, and Dobbins has been absolutely electric until it gets to about the 40-yard mark, and then it starts to slow a little bit, but that's fine. Who wouldn't, right? Obviously, this is a very conservative passing attack, so the run game has been utilized so far. The one thing I will caution, and at this point, Dobbins, because it's back-to-back really big weeks, and because the Chargers are still going to be very stubborn about running the football, I do think you probably still have to start Dobbins in fantasy anyway. I will say, the Steelers' defense, a little bit better than the Raiders and the Panthers, who these guys were facing to start things off. So, just giving you a heads up that maybe this isn't going to be the bountiful running day that Dobbins has provided us so far. Also, on the Pittsburgh defensive side of things, the run defense is quite good. They faced Atlanta and Denver, both teams who I would suggest wanted to be a little bit run heavy, Atlanta, it became a little bit predictable because Kirk Cousins couldn't move in that game, but Bijan Robinson is quite good. And so when you have a run defense that is stepping up in the way that Pittsburgh's was able to, 4th in defensive EPA per rush, that's pretty impressive when you do that against them. And then Denver's a team that wants to run, and you would think that you would have a strong point from Williams. you know, it's a little bit shaky. Or not a little bit shaky, sorry. You would think that that would be something they would want to do, but Pittsburgh was able to lock it down. And so I do think that it is interesting, this kind of chess match. The one last part of it is the Chargers have the third lowest early pass down rate in the NFL. I do think Pittsburgh has a chance to put the Chargers in some difficult situations in these games where if they can shut down that run early, force Herbert into some 3rd and 8 type of situations. I think Herbert is very talented. I don't think the same for his receiving core, though. And when you can have Watt and those guys just ears back and go, it makes it a little bit interesting. Also, Herbert's health is certainly something to keep in mind. I don't think that he is going to be sat or anything like that, though. Also, shout out to Bunk Tuesday 44. I hope that I was getting that one right. But the latest follow on here. Nailed it. Excellent. Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And I appreciate the follow. I believe that gets us to 99 now. I am very bad at the, like, I feel weird in asking for follows and subs and all of those sorts of things. But if we could get that to 100, you know, Bunk did half the work there, getting us to 99. If we could get that number to 100, that would be super duper fantastic, and I would greatly appreciate it. But I love having all you guys around here and chatting some football with you. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Bunk, I see the BC Lions logo there. I know the Lions aren't playing this week, but we do got some CFL talk coming up after we get through the NFL breakdowns here. And yes, Deeds, the welcoming committee as well. And also welcome to Deeds in the chat. I'm going to need to tidy some of this up for the podcast audio. I've just been throwing it out there, and none of this is going to make any sense to anyone listening. But still, it's fun, and I'm having a blast chatting with you guys. So, let's get on to now when Pittsburgh has the football. I am surprised to see, statistically, some of the struggles this run game has had so far this year. They are 30th in EPA per rush. They are 29th in rushing success rate. They are running it a lot. They're just not running it successfully. And that is a little bit surprising given how dedicated they are to just running the football. But this is a team right now that is just, they're just not getting it done in any aspect of offensive football. They are 29th in rushing success rate. They are 25th in dropback success rate and 29th overall. So they are working from behind the chains an awful lot and not putting themselves in really advantageous situations. It has been very conservative so far in the passing game. The Chargers defense has been fantastic. Again, against the Raiders and against the Panthers. So how seriously can we take them? I do think that we can take them kind of seriously. Also, I would say at least the Raiders' offense is better than Pittsburgh's, right? Maybe? Yeah, I would say so. The pick in this game is Pittsburgh -1. It's going to be ugly, and even under 36.5 feels a little bit tempting, quite honestly. But I think that the health of Herbert is an issue, and I think they are going to understand that running against the Raiders and the Panthers, a little bit different than running against the Steelers. In terms of fantasy, like I said before, I think you have to trust Dobbins just because he has been so good in the first couple of weeks and because the opportunities are 100% going to be there. So I think you do have to trust him this week. I am certainly trying to avoid Justin Herbert as much as I can. I know in the Vampire League with Deeds and Toxic here in the chat, I have Herbert right now, but I have made a move, and I know I also said avoid Sam Darnold, but when you're building a team entirely off the waiver wire, you got to do what you got to do. And so Sam Darnold has been a pickup for me. I believe I went Darnold this week, or I've just given everything away. But either way, try to avoid Herbert is the long story short in all of that. He has been dealing with some injuries. I am also concerned about the pass catchers then. I know we gave out Quentin Johnston as a waiver wire ad, but again, that was with the caveat that they are playing Pittsburgh this week and fantasy points aren't going to be a bountiful amount. So I would hope that you have a better option. If not, throw him out there and hopefully he finds his way, trips and falls into the end zone. For the Steelers, I think you can go with the running back duo with Najee and with Jalen Warren. I do think that the volume is going to be there, and maybe the Chargers defense is a touch overrated in the run game. Pickens should be okay, but that one's falling faster and faster every week, and in no world should you ever start Justin Fields, ever. On to Philadelphia against New Orleans, one of the more intriguing matchups of the weekend. New Orleans favored by 2.5 points with a total sitting at 49.5. When New Orleans has the football, big things have been happening. They have made some big changes in terms of motion, in terms of the use of play action. They feel faster with Shaheed busting down the sidelines. Olave has room. Kamara has fixed his legs, so that's nice. There has been a lot going on with this team so far. I do wonder what it looks like when there is some resistance from the other team, when they aren't just blowing a team out of the water or facing a better defense. Because I do think, like, Carolina week 1, woof. And Dallas week 2, I do think as the season goes along, while that was impressive, don't get me wrong, it's going to look a little bit less impressive. I do think Philadelphia's defense, while flawed, is going to put up a bit more of a resistance. And so I am very interested to see how New Orleans is able to move the ball against the Philadelphia team that has given up some yards to Atlanta and to Green Bay in the first couple of weeks. They are 31st in defensive DVOA. So it hasn't been the prettiest so far defensively. So there is an opportunity here for New Orleans maybe to put up some numbers. But I do still think that this is a little smoke and mirrors, and we're going to look back at like week 10, like, oh man, remember we thought the Saints were going to win the Super Bowl for a couple of weeks there? That was wild. When Philadelphia has the ball, the offenses move the ball really well through the air, and realistically, they are one drop away from being 2-0. And everyone, I think, viewing this team quite a bit differently. And I think, honestly, this team being favored in this game. New Orleans defense, though, is legit. Dennis Allen, I think he sucks as a head coach, although this year is going well. But I do think that he knows how to coach up a defense. So this is going to be, I think, it's going to be a really, really interesting game. I still have to go with Philadelphia. I don't think I can change my mind so much over 2 weeks that I can get to New Orleans being a team that can beat the Eagles here. And so I am going to go, going to take the points and the Eagles. Also, we're going to get a player prop in here. We're going to go Alvin Kamara over 65.5 rushing yards. Philadelphia's defense is 31st in EPA per rush and 27th in defensive rush success rate. So they've been kind of gashed up a little bit. Now, that's Josh Jacobs and it's Bijan Robinson, but this is Alvin Kamara. So I think that a good game could be had for Kamara. In terms of fantasy, the Eagles have given up the 11th most points to fantasy quarterbacks. I would say you can start Carr and feel good about it. Kamara is for sure a play. Olave is as well. I do think Shaheed can come up with a couple of big plays in this game and justify him being owned. Taysom Hill, it hasn't really clicked yet, although if you have him, you probably have to start him because who in their right mind owns 2 tight ends? Philadelphia, this is a team you play your studs. Jalen Hurts, yes. Barkley, yes. Smith, yes. Check on A.J. Brown's health status. Obviously, if he's not playing, don't. But he is someone who I think you can start relatively confidently. On to Green Bay against Tennessee. The Titans are favored by 2 points. They, of the variety of team that traded Malik Willis away for a 7th round pick. So they know what they are getting into facing this Green Bay Packers offense here this week. Tennessee's defense has actually been pretty solid. They're 9th in DVOA right now. The defense has played well enough to have this team be 2-0. It has been a couple of mistakes from Will Levis week in and week out that have kind of hurt this team. And there was the shot on the sideline of the coach being like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? And that, becomes a bit of an issue. But I do think defensively you can trust this team. And also, we know that out in Indianapolis with Gus Bradley, it's 3 high zone, right? Like that, we're going to play our way and we're going to make we're going to, no matter what you do, we can still play our way and we're going to dictate to you. Well, that didn't work against Green Bay. I do think Tennessee is going to make any adjustment and probably limit things for the Packers in this game. So I do have some worries about Green Bay offensively. When Tennessee has the ball, Levis has turned it over in some really difficult spots. And like I said, they would be they should be 2-0. And obviously, if they won those 2 games, I think they'd probably be a sizable favorite. In these games. Tony Pollard has also found his legs so far this season. He has been a bit of a beast. And so that has been interesting to see. It is going up against a pretty good run defense out in Green Bay so far this year. The pick, though, is the Titans -2. Again, I know we got bit by this last week, but the fact that I only have to win by 2 against Malik Willis feels good. Feels solid. feels like a win. So we're going to go Tennessee -2. From a fantasy standpoint, I have trouble trusting the Green Bay weapons aside from Josh Jacobs. If you have to play any of the receivers, then I guess go for it. But I have a very difficult time trusting any of those guys right now. And even honestly, Jacobs, I think maybe hits a bit of a wall this week, but you have to play him based on, A, where you drafted him, and B, how well he has played so far this season. And on the Tennessee side, I do think like Pollard over Spears is definitely the move here. Spears is kind of now a wait and see. And I actually have it written down here. He is a must sit right now. It hasn't clicked for him, and it really has for Pollard. That has been interesting. Ridley is probably the only Tennessee player you can trust. I think with Hopkins, his next best game is going to be on my bench before I see what he is really ready to do. New York Giants taking on the Cleveland Browns. This game's going to suck. We don't need to go too far into this one. The Giants' offense has been abysmal. Their defense has been worse. Yeah, they are 25th in offensive DVOA, 26th in defensive DVOA, which puts them 29th overall. Taking on the Cleveland Browns, 12th in defensive DVOA, 29th in offense, 27th in defense overall. It's just going to be ugly. It's just going to be so bad. The Giants are basically bottom 6 in every offensive category I look at. Cleveland's defense is 12th and top 10 in a lot of areas. Again, 12th overall in DVOA, but top 10 in a lot of interesting areas defensively. When Cleveland has the ball, the offense has been dreadful, but so has the Giants' defense. So honestly, I have no idea. But looking at this game, Cleveland shouldn't be a touchdown favorite against anyone. And so, just on principle alone, I am taking Giants -6.5, and just hoping to God that Scott Hansen doesn't shift to this game too much during Red Zone this week, because it's going to be gross. From a fantasy standpoint, the Giants have allowed the 8th most points to running backs this year, so I think you can trust Jerome Ford this week. Other than that, no. Amari Cooper, it hasn't clicked so far this year. Judy has actually been okay, so maybe there's something going on there, maybe in a flex option, and in deeper leagues, Cooper you can go to as well. Neighbors is the only Giant that should even be rostered. Wan'Dale Robinson in deeper-ish leagues, maybe, but yeah, no, it's this game's gonna suck. It's going to be very bad. And even if it's exciting at the end, like it's turned into this Wild West shootout and Watson and Jones are just exchanging touchdowns, it's still going to be a bad game. It's just going to be an exciting game. There is a difference. Chicago taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Colts favored by 1.5. The over-under is at 43.5. Chicago's offense has underdelivered so far. Caleb Williams, it hasn't looked great. And I heard on a podcast today, they were saying, like, if Caleb Williams didn't come in with the former Heisman pedigree and the #1 overall pick pedigree and all of those things, he'd probably be, like, close to getting benched, honestly, right now. It didn't look great in either of the first 2 games. It looked better in the second game, but that's just because the first game was so abysmal. They're 31st in DVOA. They are 30th in EPA per dropback and 29th in dropback success rate. The Colts haven't really put up great numbers defensively either, although they faced the Texans and the Packers. Now, they faced the Packers, who had Malik Willis, and it's concerning how much trouble they had limiting him. So I do think there is an opportunity here for Chicago to get right. Again, as I said, the Indianapolis Colts do not make many adjustments defensively. They have their game plan, and they make it fit in every game that they play. And for 2 years, it hasn't worked. I don't know why they would change that now. Even though we saw on Sunday night that if you just hit one more guy into that line, you're going to blow up everything they do, because this is 1932 in Chicago. And it's like, a blitz in this economy? You aren't used to that, apparently. So I am so fascinated with this side of the ball because of how bad it has looked for Chicago, but how bad I think the Indianapolis Colts are. When Indy has the ball, the offense is 10th in DVOA, but 23rd in dropback success rate. So they are putting up some big plays, but when it comes to like actually moving the football, it's just not clicking for them right now. Chicago's defense has been excellent so far. They gave Houston some troubles, and that offense is better than the Colts. And so because of the Chicago defense, I think the Bears get the win here. Again, Jim Ross would describe this one as bowling shoe ugly, but this is absolutely a game that I think the Bears defense gets in the win. I'm going Bears money line on this one as my official pick for this game. By the way, I should kind of clarify, I don't actually bet on all of these. I have some picks to click that I still am only going to give podcast-wise, just because I am slightly unsure on the gambling rules on Twitch. And so I'm just, but I do a pick per game just to kind of force us to make at least one call in this game. But then I have some picks to click that I will give out podcast-wise. As a podcast exclusive. There we go. From a fantasy football standpoint, DJ Moore is basically the only Bear that I am trusting. Maybe Keenan Allen, but it sounds like he is out in this game, so no. I'm not trusting the running backs, and Lord help you if you have to trust Caleb Williams, even against a Colts defense that I obviously have very minimal respect for. For Indianapolis, I would try to find someone else other than Anthony Richardson this week, just based on how good I think Chicago's defense is going to be. You probably have to start Pittman, but I'm not trusting any other Colts pass catcher. And Jonathan Taylor is kind of the only one that you trust on a week-in, week-out basis. Miami taking on Seattle. The Seahawks are favored by 4.5 points with a total at 41.5. When Miami has the ball, there's obviously some concern right now. Skylar Thompson is in. Tua Tagovailoa is out. I will say, this offense kind of looked bad with Tua, even. Like they just got past Jacksonville in week 1, and they just got curb stomped by Buffalo in week 2. So it's not like you have had this high-powered machine, not like Bunk Toozy 44, who has the BC Lions, and everything was rolling with Vernon Adams, and then all of a sudden there's an injury, and now then you have Jake Dolegala coming in for a week, and then, you know, the Rorik stuff and all that. But this isn't that. This is an offense that was struggling, that has now taken a significant step backwards in the quarterback position. Yes, that Nate guy for BC now. But this is a significant downgrade. No matter what you think of Tua, everyone outside of the Skylar Thompson household thinks that Tua is a better quarterback than Skylar Thompson. So this sucks for Miami's offense. I have some concerns. Seattle's defense has been excellent so far. Their defensive stats are very, very good. Now, they've played Denver and New England. I do think that this is going to be an improved defense, and this is one of those ones where confirmation bias can get you, because you see the stats for Seattle. They are 5th in defensive DVOA, they are 7th in defensive EPA, and 3rd in defensive success rate. And so I assumed coming into the year, new coach, some young pieces building up on this defense, this was going to be a good defense. And so when you see for 2 weeks those numbers, it's like, okay, defense is good. They played Jacoby Brissett and Bo Nix. Now, they made them both look like doo-doo, but still, I do have just the slightest bit of concern about what happens when they have a real offense to face. Now, again, it's Skylar Thompson this week, so we're not exactly going up into the Hall of Fame level for quarterbacks, but I am interested in this one. Bunk Toozy's NFL team, the Seattle Seahawks. I guess I should have assumed. We have a very Todd Bertuzzi themed name, and we are BC Lions fans, so I should have assumed West Coast, Best Coast thing going on with the Seattle Seahawks. And Bunk says, now, if only the offense can get going. Yeah, that has certainly been a bit of a thing. Seattle, they've been effective-ish. Like the stats, they are 6th in DVOA. They haven't been able to run the ball for shit, apparently. But they are 9th in EPA per dropback, 28th in EPA per run. I guess Charbonnet had a bit of a rough go there with Kenneth Walker banged up. But they've been able to move the ball. And again, while we are kind of taking a shot at the Denver and New England offenses, those defenses are pretty good. New England's quite good, although last night didn't really show that. But Denver's, we expect both those defenses to be pretty good. And so I do think that while Bunk here is a little bit worried about Seattle's offense, I'm not. I think Gino is fine. DK Metcalf is a beast. I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett. I do think this offense is really going to start clicking. We have a ticket with Seattle to win this division. And I'm not worried about it right now. It does seem like a bit of a sucker play here. Like Seattle going up against Skylar Thompson, it feels like they should be favored by more than 4.5. And so this one kind of feels like found money, but my pick for this game is Seattle minus 4.5. On a fantasy standpoint, I think you have to trust your studs with the Dolphins. Achane, you have to. Tyreek Hill, you have to. Waddle, you have to. Like, you just drafted those guys in places where you have to trust them. I wouldn't start Skylar Thompson if I was being held at gunpoint. I would have some concerns about that. I do worry about Mostert if he is healthy. I don't know if I would be starting him anyway. Hello there, Big Mako, or Mako. Apologies if I got that one wrong. But yeah, either way, like I think you are starting your main Dolphins here. If Mostert is healthy, which I don't think he will be, it sounds like he is doubtful for this game, but that would be an avoidance for me. For the Seahawks, I think you can trust the weapons. If Walker is healthy, I think you put him in. Charbonnet, I think still, even with Walker in there, gets a little bit of volume. Obviously, DK Metcalf is a freak of nature and should be in your fantasy lineups always. Lockett and JSN, I'm a little worried that it's kind of your turn, my turn, and just kind of dependent on how defenses try to limit them. But I do think both of them, as this offense starts to kind of figure out what it is in picking up the pace a little bit this year, I do think both those guys have some value. Carolina against the Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are my favorite team, just for the new people in the chat. So if you're concerned about some bias, there is definitely some. When Carolina has the ball, Andy Dalton is going to be the one under center. He's at least going to be a little bit more competent, but I feel like we are kind of overdoing a couple of things. This isn't just this unbelievable team that shoddy quarterback play has significantly limited over the last couple of weeks. This is genuinely one of the worst football teams ever assembled. And yeah, the quarterback's been dog shit, but so has almost everybody else. And so Andy Dalton coming in here doesn't fix everything right away. They are abysmal in every area of the sport. And I'm saying all of this, they're going to beat the Raiders by 10 now. But like, they are a really, really bad team. And so yes, Andy Dalton's going to come in and do his thing. But God damn, if people are, oh, well, look at that. Like the line, when they put Dalton in, the line went from Raiders -7, which was probably too high anyway, for reasons we'll explain in a second, to Raiders -4.5 here. And the total, sorry, I think I forgot to give this out. The total's at 40.5. Like, what do we think Andy Dalton's going to do with this team? I guess, like, complete some passes. But I have some concerns about Andy Dalton in this offense. From a Raiders standpoint, defensively, they've been pretty good against the Chargers, who offensively aren't, and the Ravens, who offensively are. So it's been all right for the Raiders. When Vegas has the ball, they were at least able to get it moving against the Baltimore Ravens. They got just shut down by the Chargers in week 1. But Minshew is getting a little bit more comfortable with just, fuck it, I'll throw it to Devontae Adams. And he has certainly found something in Brock Bowers. This team can move the ball a little bit, and I have some faith that they're going to be able to get that done, because again, Carolina's defense, the drizzling shits. So my official pick for this game is Raiders -4.5. I also would look at Brock Bowers over 44.5. From a fantasy standpoint, if you're desperate, Deontay Johnson. And if you're super desperate, Chuba Hubbard. That's it. Only if you're desperate or if you're playing in like a 95-team league. For the Raiders, Bowers is obviously, like, he is a must-start every week at tight end. You probably don't have multiple tight ends, so most tight ends on your roster are must-starts every week. Adams is a beast, and Myers is fine. There is no running back that you want on this team. Alexander Madison's the best running back that they have. That should concern you. But yeah, big Mako. We are running with the Raiders here this week. Also, I should let you know that because the Raiders are my favorite team, I do a team-specific podcast just for the Vegas Raiders. Not live, but just on the Couch Potato Diary podcast feed, and also on the Couch Potato Diary YouTube channel. It's like 15 minutes every week on those, but I do that for a few of my favorite teams as their seasons kind of go on. Baltimore against Dallas, a marquee matchup of holy shit, these teams need to win. Baltimore is favored by a point. The total is at 48.5. Both of these teams have underperformed, I would say, to start this season. let's start when Dallas has the ball. The offense had a big night against Cleveland, but really struggled against New Orleans. I think that there was a lot going on in Cleveland, and I think, like, New Orleans isn't as good as Dallas made them out to be, but I don't think Dallas's offense is as good as Cleveland made them look. So I do think that there's going to be a happy medium. I do think Dallas can move the ball a little bit, but I don't think, honestly, and if you guys, for those of you who are new, in the preseason previews that we did, I am not on this Cowboys team at all. I think that they are severely lacking talent on both sides of the football. And so I don't think they're going to lose by 20 every week. I think they are certainly more the team that played New Orleans than the team that played Cleveland. For Baltimore, this defense has given up a few good games. And so this is a really interesting matchup with a Cowboys offense that still, it's Dak, it's CeeDee, they have their guys. But I don't think very highly of them. And a Ravens defense that I do think you at least have to take a little bit seriously, but it was one of the things I said I was worried I was wrong about in the preseason. Queen leaving to go to Pittsburgh. I know I keep harping on this, but that is such a huge loss, and I don't know if they've been able to really figure out how to manage that yet. They have had some struggles in allowing teams to move the ball on you. M. Cronsley, I see the fantasy question. I will get to that in just a brief moment. When Baltimore has the ball, this offense has moved things really, really well. They just haven't been able to finish drives so far. Baltimore is 24th in offensive DVOA, but they are 9th in EPA per run. And so I do think that this is a team that can move the football here. Dallas's defense has been all over the place. They are 5th in defensive success rate. They are 30th in defensive rush success rate. But Alvin Kamara will do that to you. So they've been able to limit successful passes, but haven't been able to limit successful runs at all. You kind of need to do that against Baltimore. And so again, this is such a... Baltimore at 0-3 would be a disaster. Dallas at 1-2, and ESPN is leading First Take on Monday with Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick, right? Like that's the conversations that are being had. So this is a gigantic game. I think the Ravens are better. And so I'm going to go with Baltimore -1. Also a prop. We're going to go Lamar over 213.5 passing yards. All right. M. Cronsley, I think I'm saying that right. M. Cronsley in the chat. PPR, would you start Zach Charbonnet over either James Conner or James Cook, or keep those two? Very interesting question. You have Conner going up against Detroit, who's actually been pretty good against the run so far this year. James Cook with Buffalo. They are going up against Jacksonville. I still think, like, Charbonnet looked a little bit last week. I know it at PPR, so that does make it a little bit more enticing for Charbonnet to start over Conner and over James Cook. I do think I would go Conner and Cook still over Charbonnet. Conner has just looked so good, and that offense has looked really, really good. And he is involved in the passing game. It's not his biggest weapon, but he's involved in the passing game. Cook, I think they would like to get him a little bit more involved in the pass, but he is certainly getting a lot of opportunities running the football. And so I do think those guys are the way to go. So I would go Conner and Cooks and Cook, sorry, yeah, and Bunk. To your point, I have Connors in a 16-team keeper league that I am in, and he has been so much fun to watch so far. And so Charbonnet, while I do think there is something there, I just have a little bit of a concern about a lack of productivity last week. So I will go Conner and Cook. From a fantasy standpoint, in Baltimore against Dallas, I think you start your studs here. We're not sitting Lamar Jackson ever, right? But Derrick Henry, I think you can trust him here. Mark Andrews is back in the circle of trust after being okay last week. And Zay Flowers is a go for Baltimore. On Dallas, Prescott, yeah, I do think they're going to be able to move the ball here. So I will go Prescott. I do think you can trust Zeke a little bit, and CeeDee Lamb for sure. And then, like, the tight ends, Ferguson, again, you probably have to, just because who has 2 tight ends. San Francisco taking on the LA Rams. The Niners are favored by 7 points. The total is at 43.5. An interesting development, as it sounds like George Kittle is going to be out for this game. So no CMC, no Deebo Samuel, no Kittle. Does sound like Ayuk is coming into this game. He is probably going to be sextuple teamed when he is out there, because who else are you throwing to? But this is Kyle Shanahan, and it's Brock Purdy who's been playing some decent football to start this season. So I do think that there is still something going for this team, although the offense has gotten off to a bit of a slow start. The Rams, speaking of James Conner, got obliterated last week by the Arizona Cardinals. And now, I don't think, given the limitations that San Francisco has offensively, that they are the Arizona Cardinals, which, boy, did we think we'd be saying that 3 weeks into the year? No. But I do think that this is a team that it struggles defensively, we will say. And wouldn't you know it, losing Aaron Donald isn't great for the old defensive stats going forward. So be careful for, just be careful if you're trusting the Rams in this spot. When the LA Rams have the ball, I don't think they're shedding any tears for the issues that San Francisco has. This offense is dealing with some issues as well with Puka Nacua and with Cooper Kupp. And so Kyron Williams is basically the only guy you trust on this offense. San Francisco's defense, underlying numbers don't look amazing, but the talent is certainly there. This is going to be, I think, a rock fight of a game. And so I think it goes under 43.5. From a fantasy standpoint, I do think Mason is the guy in San Francisco. He'll get some. Ayuk is going to probably step up. And I think Juwan Johnson works his way. He was a waiver wire pickup this week. I think that's the way you go. For the Rams, Williams may be the guy, and that's about it. Anyone else, you're fishing in guys that you're just not comfortable with, and I would have to think you have some other options. Deed's reminding us that Ferguson is listed as questionable. So, yes, watch that status. This is a 2 o'clock game, I believe. So be a little bit careful with that. Because you don't want to have to go out and pick up the San Francisco backup tight end, whoever that may be. Also, I missed this as we were going along, but we have reached 100 followers. So I didn't catch the name of who did that, but thank you very much to everyone here who has given me a follow. I really do appreciate that. On to the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Detroit Lions. The Lions are favored by 2.5 points. The total is at 51.5. When Arizona has the ball, big things happen. They are third in EPA per play and third in EPA per dropback. Harrison getting rolling is really, really good. Kyler looks amazing and looks like the guy who we believed in when we had a Arizona to make the playoffs ticket from the beginning of the year. Detroit had some issues with the Rams offense back in their week 1 game. And that's looking a little bit more concerning. Even when Cooper Kupp was healthy, that offense just got whooped on by Arizona defensively. And so that makes you just kind of furrow the brow a little bit at what's going on in Detroit. I thought that this was going to be a defense that was improved. And, I mean, they got after Baker Mayfield. They still lose, giving up 20 points. But the 5 sacks by Hutchinson, he is just an absolute beast. So it's going to be an interesting test for the offensive line out in Arizona. When Detroit has the ball, the passing game hasn't been as effective so far this season. Detroit is 18th in offensive DVOA. They are 25th in EPA per dropback. Goff has kind of looked like old Goff again, and that has been a concern for this team. And I do think that a little bit of it is you have this new shiny toy in Jameson Williams, who on our preview shows we were big upping all preseason. I don't know if Goff knows how to use it. Like, they have not used Sam Laporta effectively at all so far this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is still the best player on this team, is what was overly limited in week 1, and then they kind of got him back going in week 2, but that kind of took away from Williams. So I think he is just figuring out how to distribute everything. But he's not great at that. So I do worry that this offense is going to take a little bit of time to click, much like the defense has taken some time. The Cardinals, they are not a good defense, but they are an improved defense. And they gave the Rams a bit of a trouble last week, although, again, the injury issues are what they are with the Rams. But this is, I think, it's not a good defense in Arizona. And so this could be a get-right spot here for Detroit's offense. But overall, I like Arizona in this spot. I'll take Arizona plus 2.5. I think Kyler goes out and gets it done, and we have a lot of conversations about how seriously we need to take the Arizona Cardinals. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs, over 49.5 yards on the ground. Arizona's run defense right now is 32nd. Is 25th in run success rate. So it hasn't been great to start the year. We'll be waiting all day for Sunday night. Oh, no, I didn't do the fantasy part. Sorry. Such a big build-up and everything. I do think from a fantasy standpoint, you're starting almost everyone in this game, right? We just said Connor over Charbonnet for the Lions. Goff has struggled, but this is a really, really interesting matchup against Arizona. Montgomery and Gibbs, we just talked about Arizona struggles against the run. Williams, because he is a big play threat. Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he is good. And Laporta, because you drafted him in the second round. So those are the guys. Again, watch for injuries and all that, but those are the guys. For the Cardinals, it's Kyler for sure. He this week is a must start. Connor is a start, even though the Lions have allowed the second fewest points to running backs so far this year. I do think that the electricity of this offense is going to get him going a little bit there. And that, like, Harrison and McBride are no-brainers. And even for deeper leagues, Michael Wilson is kind of the play. He hasn't got the boatload of the targets yet, but he's been out there for a lot of plays, and I think that starts to kind of click. All right, now, Sunday Night Football. It'll be Kansas City taking on the Atlanta Falcons. The Chiefs favored by 3. The total is at 46.5. Kansas City's offense had some issues as Cincinnati's defense is generally one to do. They give them some problems sometimes. And I'm not super sure I'm high on Cincinnati's defense, so I have some concerns about that. It was a bit more like last year, where just moving the ball was kind of hard for them to do. Hopefully that was just a blip, because they looked really good against Baltimore in week 1. I'll be interested to see how they do with No Pacheco. Atlanta's defense has been kind of middle of the road, 17th in defensive DVOA. They did face Pittsburgh, who was bland, and Philadelphia without Brown. I do think it's a good defense, but I don't know if they've really proven it just yet. When Atlanta has the ball, they moved the ball well late last week against Philadelphia, and Cousins looked better. They are 8th in DVOA and 7th in dropback success rate and are still getting things figured out. Kansas City's defense, they've given up big yards to tight ends, and so the thought would be Pitts is the guy. I am interested in how they play this, because I kind of feel like in week 1 likely, and in week 2 Gesicki, it was more what Kansas City was taking away than necessarily a vulnerability against the tight end. In week 1, they doubled Mark Andrews basically anytime he set foot on the field and left it so it's like, yeah, okay, if you're going to beat us with likely, you're going to beat us with likely. Fine. In week 2, they had McDuffie on Jamar Chase and really did a good job in limiting him. And it's like, okay, if you're going to go to Gesicki, go to Gesicki. Fine. Pitts is a bit of a different weapon than Gesicki and likely. And so I do wonder how much of that coverage goes there and what they are able to do. And so I think defensively, we might see another kind of shadow game here for McDuffie, put him on London, have a little bit more focus then in kind of maybe a double team type of a situation on Kyle Pitts, and try to make the rest of them beat you. That kind of feels like the game plan. So I don't know on the surface, like Pitts may still have a good game, but like on the surface, it looks like, oh, Kansas City's dog shit against the tight end. But in thinking about it a little bit more this week and listening to some podcasts and those different things, it's like, well, maybe this was more the strategy than just, oh, we're dog shit against tight end. And so that being said, I do wonder if there is a Mooney game in here. I do think Kansas City wins, and I do think they cover. 2 close wins against teams who know them well might be skewing things a little bit, so I think Kansas City covers. Also, we'll be going with Mooney over 34.5 run yards, and London under 61.5 in the receiving yards. Shout out to Sakuragi himself. The following is a Twitch live stream presentation of HBO Sports Network of Champions. There is some boxing talk coming up. Watching the Canelo fight the other day. I know I'm tangent now. He's here, or they are here after watching some throwback fights. Watching the Canelo fight and seeing one of the shots where he's celebrating, and there's the HBO thing up in the thing. It's like, man, I miss HBO boxing. You know, like Boxing After Dark, where you get some of those things, the big pay-per-view events, and then a week later, it's on free TV, and that's so much fun. I miss HBO boxing, and I'll get into some of that more a little bit as we get into the boxing stuff. As far as fantasy football goes, for the Kansas City Chiefs, you gonna sit Mahomes? No, of course not. I do think you have to give Worthy another shot along with Rice and Kelsey. I'd rather go with P. Ryan in the running back room and just kind of see what Steele is, just kind of a wait and see. But I would rather not have to start P. Ryan at all, quite frankly. On the Atlanta side, Cousins should do okay against Kansas City's defense, 23rd in defensive EPA per play and 22nd in DVOA. Robinson has been 82%, or has had, 82% of the running back snaps for the Falcons this year. He is a must start every week. And if we were redrafting today, he'd probably be the number one player in fantasy. I do think you have to start London, even if I do think it's going to be an off game. You also have to start Pitts because, again, do we have 2 tight ends? And also, I do think Mooney is a play because he has a good game. Deeds letting us know that just an update, Ferguson has just had his status move to healthy. So he is good to go for this one. Monday Night Football, the first of 2. It is Jacksonville taking on Buffalo. The Bills favored by 5.5 with the total at 45.5. Jacksonville has struggled, but they're a couple plays away from being 2-0. If Etienne doesn't fumble going into the end zone against Miami, and if there is, if they don't have some of the issues they have against Cleveland, then they're 2-0. Now, Cleveland's defense is good. Everyone's going to have issues with them, but they at least should be 1-1. Aside from Thomas, though, they don't really have big playmakers this year. The run game has struggled, although Miami and Cleveland are defenses we expect to be relatively good against those. Buffalo's defense had some struggles against Arizona, but, like, who hasn't? They regrouped against Miami and just absolutely annihilated them. But overall, I do think they can be beat, and I do think we're overestimating them a little bit. Remember, all the talk in the offseason, oh, well, Milano's hurt. This defense can't do anything. Oh, well, this guy's hurt. They can't. Oh, there's all these changes. And then a couple of weeks, they look good. Oh, no, it's the Buffalo Bills. Here they go again. Like, I can't buy into them in that way. Just yet. We'll see what they do here this week. When Buffalo has the ball, Josh Allen has been tremendous. He is, I think, 2nd or 3rd in potential MVP voting right now. I do think that there is a... I think he's at plus 450 right now, which is interesting, I think. But neither here nor there. Jacksonville has had some good defensive success rate numbers, and so that does make me think that there could be a little bit of a bounce back here for them, and they may give Buffalo a few issues. Jacksonville, plus 5.5 is the play here. I think this is a gigantic game for them. They cannot afford to go 0-3, and I think they come back with a big bounce back game. I don't think they win, but I think they keep this game really, really close. Toxic and Deeds, for those who are kind of new around here, they are chatting about the Vampire League that we have. I see Toxic has made some moves as he's gone out and picked up Jerry Jeudy. And so I'm the Vampire in this league, but yeah, we did a Vampire League with some of the Twitch followers and people in the chat. And yes, the Vampire League, I think I made it have 4. If nothing else, to give me a fighting chance against some guys so that I can just like race out like, okay, well that guy, yeah, let's bring him in. That guy, let's bring him in. But I also didn't anticipate that y'all would get to use those as well and maybe limit me in what I am able to do. Okay, from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know if there's a whole lot to feel great about with Jacksonville this week. It's not a Lawrence game if you can avoid it. I do like Thomas. It doesn't scream must start, but I just think he is talented and would like to have him in my lineup. And I don't know if I really trust any of the other weapons right now. ETN, based on where he was drafted, you have to start. And God, that is so annoying because all last year, I was so out on ETN. And then this year, it's like, you know what? He showed it to me. He's good. He's in the circle of trust now. And now he's been dog shit for 2 games. What the hell, man? For the Bills, it's obvious. Allen is a go. Cook is at a 55% snap share in that backfield. And so to M. Cronsley's point, this is a guy who is getting so many opportunities that I think you just kind of have to roll with him right now. No one has really separated themselves in the wide receiver room here just yet. Shakir has the best target share. Coleman has the best snap share and the best red zone target share. But that means he has 2 red zone targets and everyone else only has 1. And you probably have to start Kincaid. Sakuragi, I will get to again, the HBO stuff. We have boxing coming up here in just a little bit. But yes, HBO boxing, unbelievable. And then 2002 would have been a great time to get into that. Washington taking on Cincinnati. Last game on the slate. Cincinnati minus 7.5 with the total at 46.5. When Washington has the ball, they've actually been okay. Like they are 4th in EPA per play, 5th in success rate, 5th in EPA per dropback, 3rd in dropback success rate, and 4th in EPA per run. The issue, they haven't scored at all. And this is one of those ones. We talked about it with the Giants last week. Yes, the Giants only gave up 21 points to Washington. That was 7 scoring drives. And so I am, A, thinking it's a positive for Washington that you had 7 scoring drives, but B, a little bit concerned that you needed 7 field goals and couldn't punch it in the end zone against the less than vaunted defense of the New York by God, Giants. So I don't think I'm taking this offense too seriously right now. I do think they'll be able to move the ball a little bit with Daniels and probably his legs. It's just finishing drives that's an issue. Cincinnati's defense did well last week. They still looked a little bit shaky. I think they have a smart group that will be able to kind of limit things here for Daniels. When Cincinnati has the ball, it has been not an overly dynamic offense. They are 21st right now in offensive DVOA. The running metrics look good. Moss himself hasn't looked all that good, like just tape-wise, but the stats are looking all right for this group right now. And the Commanders have one of the worst defenses the sport has ever seen. So I do think Cincinnati gets this done. I would like to think that the Commanders offense might be able to get this thing going, but that defense is just so bad that I think you have to go with Cincinnati here. Daniels, he could be a weapon this week when we transition into the fantasy talk. Cincinnati has limited fantasy scoring for quarterbacks, but they did face Jacoby Brissett in week 1. So how much can you trust that? Brian Robinson has a 45% attempt share in this backfield right now for Washington. So he is, I think, the only other option that I'm looking to start this week. Even like Daniels probably wouldn't be the guy I would want to go with. For the Bengals, you start Burrow, you start Chase, and you start Moss. Brown has only had 26% of the snaps in this backfield so far. So it's a late round gamble that hasn't really paid off yet. I do think he has looked better, but that's a big gap to bridge. And Mike Gesicki is an option as the tight end. So there you go. Every game in the NFL broken down. That took a while. So thank you guys for sitting through it with me here. Okay, now it's the moment that Bunk Tuesday 44 has been waiting for as we chat some Canadian Football League. All right, the Canadian Football League goes into week 16. Just so you know, I will not be doing like full-on, like kind of like spread picks or anything like that. I write for 3 Down Nation and I do the best bets piece. And so if you want the actual picks to click for the week, that would be where to go. But a preview of the week ahead. Hamilton taking on Toronto. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have actually been playing better football lately. Just kind of whisper that one in there. But this team is actually playing some okay football right now. And a couple of things have happened. One, Bo Levi Mitchell isn't turning the ball over. They are +6 in turnover differential in the last 3 games. And because of that, look at this. You're holding onto the ball, you're scoring points, and you're winning football games. A wild situation out there, for sure. But yeah, the Ticats, to Bunk Tuesday's point there, they have finally woken up. The offense was always good. It was just they were turning the ball over and putting themselves in some really difficult spots. You're facing a Toronto defense that has given up 285 yards plus through the air in 4 of their last 5 games, including once to Bo Levi Mitchell. The Argos are in the bottom 3rd in the league in passing yards allowed per game. Also, defensively, Chris Jones... This is not a pro Chris Jones podcast by any stretch of the imagination. I was on This Week in the CFL and the Ticats audio network and came dangerously close to giving him a compliment. Yeah, not pro Chris Jones at all. That being said, my guys coached up a defense. The Ticats in the 3 games since he officially took over have allowed 24 points per game. If that were their season total, it would be the 3rd best average in the league. Now, this defense was dog shit for a while, and so the season-long numbers aren't going to look very good. But I do think Hamilton is going to be able to kind of keep this game close, and I would not be surprised if the Ticats pulled off a win. Out here in Calgary, it is the Stampeders taking on the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Speaking of team-specific shows, I do a show called the Reiner Happy Hour here on the Couch Potato Diary Network. That one is on podcast, and it is on the YouTube channel as well. You can see the Rider Lucha mask behind me. So yes, go green and white and all of those things. I know we got some... The Calgary folks here with Deeds and Toxic, but you guys know where I'm coming from on that one there. But this is a must-win for both teams. The entire way that, like, by the end of this weekend, everyone in the West could be within 3 points. If Calgary beats Saskatchewan and Edmonton beats Winnipeg, then BC Winnipeg are at 14 points. Edmonton's at 12 and Saskatchewan Calgary is 11. For the Riders, This is an opportunity to kind of put this team away. And just kind of like Calgary's had some problems lately. Now they got a tie against Montreal, some fucking how. But there is now a chance to put Calgary away if you go out, win this game, and then all of a sudden, Calgary is, what would that be, 4 points out of a playoff spot. Not insurmountable when these two teams play again in the last game of the regular season, but it's a chance to really just like add some separation there. And they would be within 1 point of a home playoff game, whether it be the West semifinal or the West final, depending on how well Edmonton does against, how well Winnipeg does against Edmonton. You also do have to worry about Edmonton coming on strong. The Riders, while they are in a top 3 spot right now, CFL.ca put out that social media graphic today with the they had the bracket out there, and they actually got it wrong to start. They had Edmonton in that 3 spot against BC. It is technically right now Saskatchewan, but no one thinks of Saskatchewan as a top 3 team in the West because of how well Edmonton has played. I do think the Riders have played okay, but they don't have the big plays that make up for some of the big mistakes that they have made. It's a lot of just like small, short, whatever. And when you do that, you have to be perfect. And the Riders, for the better part of 2 months, have been far from perfect. Penalties have been an issue. Turnovers have been an issue. I am also worried from a Saskatchewan standpoint. Carney and Lanier are out for this game, as is Milligan, who right now would be my MOP candidate for Saskatchewan. He is attending the birth of a child, so he's not going to be in the lineup. So there's a chance now for Calgary to take advantage of this. It's just been so bad out in Calgary for a bit. And again, they dragged Montreal into the mud in a 19-19 game. But the offense isn't moving the ball barely. Defensively, they are giving up too much. Far too much for what was supposed to be a pretty good defense this year. And so I think Saskatchewan is going to come up with a win. Yes, a very nice reason he's out, Bunk, and not one that I'm going to criticize even a little bit. I know some people get on athletes for that. Not me, man. That is a beautiful thing. And even if he has 108 kids, that's still a special life experience. I actually don't know the family situation there at all. But all of this to say, I just think Saskatchewan's better, and I don't think that's a Rider bias or anything like that. I just think the Riders are a better football team than the Calgary Stampeders are, and at some point they're going to show it. And I think that point is this week, so I do think the Riders get it done. The 3 Down piece publishes before props come out, and so I do feel comfortable giving these 2 out. I am going, a couple things I'm looking at. Hickson over 55.5 rush yards. There's some shops you can get that at. And Dedrick Mills under 60.5 rush yards. The Riders' run defense is just mwah. And that means I think they're going to put Mayer into obvious passing situations, which don't go well for him. Also this week, it is Montreal taking on the Ottawa Red Blacks. Ottawa, it's been a really cool story, the turnaround. We said coming into the year, this is an improved football team, and they really have showed it. But that was kind of abysmal last week against Hamilton, and they had one really bad game against Montreal earlier this year where they had 4 turnovers in that game. I worry about the complexities that Montreal can show on the defensive side. And now I worry about Ottawa on defense. With a Darius Pickett out for the rest of the season with an Achilles injury, he has been a beast so far. Second on the team in tackles with 52. He's also added a sack, an interception, and a forced fumble. I just think with the turnover issues the offense has had, with the injury issue there on the defense, Montreal does find a way. And lastly, Edmonton taking on Winnipeg. This is just going to be a really good football game. Edmonton has been on another level. Winnipeg has been winning, but like I didn't come away from those games against Saskatchewan thinking, oh boy, here come the Bombers or anything like that. Like they've just kind of been surviving a bit. Now their defense is good. Their defense is legit and going to be a very interesting test for Edmonton, but I think the Elks end up getting it done. Okay, let's shift now into the world of combat sports. 2 major cards happened last weekend with Noche UFC 306, and Canelo Alvarez fighting. And so now in the aftermath, what's next? Let's start with some boxing talk. All right, Canelo Alvarez coming off of another win this weekend as he beat Edgar Berlanga. And so my question is, who should he fight next? But before we get into that, I do want to get back to, I don't know if I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Sakuragi himself is in the chat. But what year did you watch HBO boxing for the first time? So I grew up, again, you can probably tell from the CFL talk we just had. I grew up in Saskatchewan, and small town Saskatchewan. We did not have access to HBO. So my first HBO was probably 2009 when I moved to Toronto from Calgary. Well, when I lived out here, the first time I was with a roommate, and I didn't have a ton of say over the cable things. I was moving in his place. Like, it's not like he was weird. Like, his place, but neither here nor there. So anyway, 2009, when I moved out to Toronto, had HBO as part of the TV package, and so got to watch all of that stuff. And so that is in the like Mayweather, Pacquiao kind of time there, but also you got like, it was, what was it, like Super Channel or something like that in Canada? But it was the Showcase fights, or Showtime fights, sorry, Showcase. Put on some different stuff. But those are the Showtime fights. And so between all of those, there's like Andre Ward and like the Super 6 series and stuff like that. So that was kind of my introduction to HBO boxing for real, aside from just like different clips that you would see. But Sakuragi saying 2002 was his time watching HBO. Lennox Lewis against Mike Tyson. Manny Pacquiao fought on the undercard. That's it. That is an excellent time for sure in the world of HBO boxing. And I really do wish it was back. I know I did this rant on the weekend, but when we ordered it, it was, we couldn't order, there was an issue with DAZN, so we couldn't get the DAZN broadcast. So we just ordered it on the cable pay-per-view. And that, I'm led to believe, is the Amazon product. Mauro Ranallo was phenomenal, as always. The rest of the broadcast was just horrendous. The color commentators, it didn't feel like they had a real mesh with Mauro all that well. There were some pretty obvious audio issues. They just had to restart an interview with Canelo Alvarez at one point, which is just like they missed an edit. But still, when you have that many eyeballs and you have Canelo Alvarez, like the biggest star in the sport, and you are putting on his pay-per-view, I don't care that Amazon's the B team. That needs to be better. And so it did, to the point earlier, it did make me long for the days of HBO. And yes, like Mauro, amazing. But like the Lampley and Kellerman and all of those guys and that era, it made me long for that coverage because it was just all so tight always. And like DAZN, it hasn't really had that feel ever to me. And Amazon certainly didn't. And so that was just, it was a frustration. Like if you're going to, we're already kind of in agreement that Canelo against Berlanga isn't really a $90 fight. At least give me $90 worth of production value, but they didn't even give me that. So that was a bit frustrating. Anyway, fights to make coming out of Canelo Alvarez and Berlanga. For Canelo, it has to be David Benavidez next. It simply has to be. That there is no other fight you can make and still convince me that Canelo is trying to be a competitive boxer in 2024 or 2025 when the next fight is going to be. There is only one. It can only be David Benavidez. I know there's been some talk that he is paying very close attention to the Beterbiev Bivol fight that is coming up next month. Don't. I mean, like, I'll watch it. It's probably gonna be a fun fight. But don't do that. Don't do that. Benavidez for so long has earned this title shot and earned this opportunity of this big statement. I think this has to be Canelo. Canelo's next fight. And if it's not, again, I don't think this is going to do irreparable damage to his legacy or anything like that, but it's just going to get a lot of groans from the boxing watching community. In terms of Berlanga, I do think that he deserves another good stage. I thought that, like, while one-sided, but he at least had a bit of a decent showing of himself. And so why not look to the same card? Caleb Plant. Let's go. Both guys, I think, would fight in a really interesting way. Both guys fought this weekend, so there is some buzz on their names anyway. Plant seemed to get quite a bit of fan support, so I think that this is a fight that you can make, and a fight that would get a lot of people very excited. And so an interesting bout, so to speak, for that one. So those are the fights I would make coming out of the Canelo pay-per-view here this weekend. Sakuragi himself, Jim Lampley, Roy Jones Jr., George Foreman, Emmanuel Stewart, Max Kellerman, and Larry Merchant. Legendary. Yeah. Oh, going to Larry Merchant's scorecard. He's like, let me tell you, Jim. And he goes into it. Max Kellerman, before he was like hot take guy, I thought he was one of the best in boxing. I do think that he kind of got into a little bit more of the hot takey stuff as things kind of went along, and he kind of learned how to play that. But I do think that he is a very smart analyst when it comes to the sport. Emmanuel Stewart, obviously amazing. Roy Jones Jr. is fun. George Foreman, legend. Like all of those, that whole time, just spectacular. And just the whole presentation, right? And even some of the shoulder programming, right? Like the HBO 24/7. I'll still watch some of those for fights that happened a decade ago because it's just so well done. And there's a lot of properties now that try to match what those guys did, but it just doesn't compare to the HBO 24/7. And nothing, production-wise, has compared to what HBO was able to do with Sakuragi said, the following is a presentation of HBO sports. And you have like some big knockouts that are happening and then at the end of the thing. And it's so professional and so very, very well done. So yeah, maybe I'm romanticizing it a little bit, but Sakuragi, you definitely got me in the feels with that one, because that was something we were talking about when I was watching it. My favorite Larry Merchant line, I wish I was 50 years younger, I would kick your ass. Oh, that was amazing when he got into it. You don't know shit about boxing. All right, now let's get into the Ultimate Fighting Championship, because they had a big show this weekend as well. It was Noche UFC, UFC 306. We have 2 new champions. What should be next for them and the former title holders? Let's get into it. All right, the fights to make coming out of UFC 306, Noche UFC, at the Sphere. Merab Dvalishvili, you are the new UFC Bantamweight champion. Congratulations, you get Umar Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov won that title eliminator earlier this year and is the deserving next in line. They hyped it up at the pay-per-view, so why not? I think that has to be the fight. Honestly, I don't know who else the challenger would be. O'Malley didn't come close in that fight to earning an immediate rematch, so that's a no. And there's no one else even in that ballpark right now. So that is a no for me. Sean O'Malley against Corey Sandhagen is, I think, what should be next for Sean O'Malley. I think it would be a wild fight. Both of them coming off of losses in some very big fights. O'Malley obviously losing in this most recent one against Merab, while Sandhagen lost his bout to Nurmagomedov, that title eliminator. And so I think that is a fight that you absolutely could make, and I think it would kind of bounce some things back a little bit, and I kind of rehab the bounce things back a little bit, wasn't how I wanted to say that. It would rehab the image, I think, of Sean O'Malley, as Dana White has kind of shit on him a little bit coming out of this fight, and I think that would be a good way to kind of build him back up, because this would be a very fun fight, and I think you would get a title challenger, might be a bit of a stretch, but reestablish a contender anyway in at 135 pounds. Moving on, Valentina Shevchenko. She is the champion again. I know that her rivalry right now with Alexa Grasso is 1-1-1. I would not do that. I think that this was such a one-sided beatdown and such a dominant performance that I think you have to kind of separate Grasso from this one a little bit now. And so I do think that this is a opportunity to let some other fighters kind of get into this one. And so I would go, apologies for the pronunciation, but Menon Fiorot. She's on a 12-fight winning streak. She is coming off of wins over Erin Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas. She has been one of the, real up-and-comers here for a little bit, and getting an opportunity now to really shine. She's beat everyone. It is just so clearly the next option for her is a title opportunity here. And like Shevchenko, it's a fresh fight that she hasn't had in a couple of years, so that'll be fun. And then Alexa Grasso, I have her against Macy Barber. Barber is finally starting to reach her potential, and really do think that she is someone who could make some noise and be a bit of a star going forward a little bit. So I do think that this is an interesting fight for her. And kind of like, okay, you have Grasso coming off of a disappointing performance in the main event, or in the co-main event there, against Shevchenko. You have Barber, who is kind of on the rise. These two fought back in 2001, and so this is an opportunity to see either, okay, what has Grasso learned, and like, can she bounce back, or what has Barber learned? How does she develop, and is she now ready for this championship opportunity? And so I do think that that is going to be an interesting bout, and one that I would absolutely make going forward. We have Diego Lopez against Max Holloway or Ilya Topuria, the winner of that. Lopez deserves a title shot. I think coming out of that, he has absolutely earned it. He's ready for a title shot. That was a beatdown of a guy who was in the top 3. He has put on some unbelievable finishes and some unbelievable fights. And so I think that this is now the time for him to get going and for him to get this championship opportunity. So Topuria and Holloway, they're going to throw it down coming up here. But I do think that the winner gets Diego Lopez. And for Brian Ortega, this is where the UFC model stumbles a little bit. Ortega has been in some absolute just battles the last few years. He could probably use a tune-up fight, right? Like, this is one, we talked about it with Izzy a little bit ago. You could probably use a fight where it's like, you know what? This isn't against a top 10 guy. It's still, like, it's fighting, it's still brain damage, it's whatever. But I kind of just need to get right here, and let's just see where I'm at. And if I lose that, then oh shit, we're in trouble. The UFC doesn't work that way. If you're in the top, you fight the top. You know, like, there are no tune-up fights or anything like that. And so I have him against Yair Rodriguez. They've each fought. They fought each other twice. Each have won one. So let's trilogy this thing up. I would anticipate that not going well for Ortega, which kind of sucks for him, but I do think that that is the most logical way to come out of this fight card here from the weekend. All right, for those of you who are joining us live, you guys have been amazing. Thank you guys so much. I have loved every little bit of it. We're now over 100 followers at 101, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you guys so much for that. I want to be a little bit more interactive with these going forward. So, hey, if you have any tips, let me know. As Deeds and Toxic will let you know. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants on all of these and trying to learn all of this shit on the fly. And so any tips or anything like that, by all means, let me know. Also, I do actual video games on here on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so for Monday, I want to know what you guys want to see me play. We have a Flames rebuild going on right now. We have a WWE 2K24 My GM, and we're trying to turn the Blue Jays into a dynasty. Also, we just talked a whole lot of boxing, and I have Fight Night Round 3. And this will, I need to figure out if my hookups still work for all of those, and this would motivate me if we picked that one. So a few choices to roll with here so far. Yes, Bunk 100% addicted to My GM. They made some tweaks that I didn't love, but overall it is still, I could play that thing for hours. We again, Toxic and Deeds and Big John, when he's in the chat, they can all attest. I kind of get lost in it a little bit, and then all of a sudden, an hour and a half have gone by. It's like, oh well, I had other things to do today. So that one, if that one wins out, absolutely happy to do it. Sakuragi himself, prediction: John Bones Jones against Stipe Miocic. I think you have to go with John Jones there. I think if both guys were fighting in their prime, it would still be John Jones. But because of the layoff by the time this fight gets to November, if we actually have it, then I just think it's so far out for Stipe to then have to step back in against the most talented fighter the sport has ever seen. It's too much. It is far too much to ask of Stipe Miocic. So I will go Johnny Bones Jones there. And then I will pick Tom Aspinall to just absolutely destroy John Jones after that. So that would be my predictions there. Also, Larry Merchant was so making criticisms on Floyd while he took some respect and praise on Manny Pacquiao in the 2000s. Oh yeah, they had their favorites for sure. And as like the Money Mayweather was really interesting because there was a bit there, like he was the most exciting guy in the sport, right? Like he was out there and he was just blasting guys and he was coming up with big wins and all of this. And then he kind of realized, you know, I might be like the best defensive fighter ever in the sport, or at least like top 5. And it's a whole lot better when I just don't get punched in the head. So if I can just do that and just win enough rounds, then hey, look at this. I'm still making a bajillion dollars. And I also am, not taking all that brain damage. So he kind of recognized that, but I do think there was a little bit of hostility, might be a bit of a strong word, but a sour taste in HBO Boxing's mouth coming off of that one. Okay, we're going to wrap up the show here. There's a couple boxing cards coming up here this weekend, so we're going to wrap up the show looking at them. But Sakuragi, again, asking Alex Pereira versus Roundtree, your predictions. I think Pereira wins it within a round. I think he is so superior to Khalil Roundtree. The two are not in the same universe. This feels like, and look, I like Roundtree. He was an Ultimate Fighter guy, right? I watched him on the Ultimate Fighter and really enjoyed him. I was one of like 8 people who watched that season still. But so I like Roundtree. He is not in this level, not even close to this level. I think Pereira ends this fight as soon as he wants to, basically, and puts Khalil Roundtree away. So I think that is within a round. Also, it's interesting you bring up the heavyweights and then Pereira. Let's get this guy a heavyweight fight. Why this man is, to steal a Brian Campbell term, daring to be great. Why are we denying him that opportunity? I don't even think we should care who that heavyweight is. Like, this could be Anderson Silva against Sandman Irving, where it's just like, yeah, doesn't need to be a top 10 guy. Just let him do it. Let's just see it. Let's just have Pereira against Tai Tuivasa and just figure it out that way. And so I don't get why we aren't allowing him to do that. And so I think it is fitting that you kind of bring them both up. I think Pereira against a John Jones would be a whole lot of fun. And I think that a Pereira against any heavyweight would be interesting, as he goes to be the first guy ever to have 3 different or championships in 3 different weight classes in the UFC. Another one here. Who do you think Zhang will face next? I'm assuming this is Zhilei Zhang. Coming off of his win over Deontay Wilder. That was back in June in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Interesting. Let's. I'm gonna hit the thing for the boxing, and we'll get into that one. All right, I think I misunderstood the question there. So I was preparing a boxing answer, so give me a second on that one. But we do have a couple of boxing cards coming up here this weekend. As tonight, it is Jaime Munguia going back into the ring against the Canadian in Baznian. I know I'm saying that right, or wrong. Apologies for that one. And then coming up on Saturday, it is Daniel Dubois against Anthony Joshua. And so maybe that's why I assumed in the chat it was Zhang that we were talking about, because I have heavyweight boxing on the mind. But let's start with Munguia as he fights Banzian. Fights this weekend. This is a fight that he should win, right? Like there is no doubt that Munguia should win this fight. He is a minus 1,400 favorite. Him to win by KO is minus 275. Like, this is not a fight that should be overly competitive by any stretch of the imagination. He won 4 of his last 5, 4 of his last 5 by KO going into the Canelo fight. Like, he should just come in here. Again, all due respect to the Canadian here, out of Quebec. But Banzignan, no, not on this level. Coming off of a draw in his last fight, he had 2 KO wins before that. I just don't see him being able to keep up with Jaime Munguia. But this is one of the things we talked about this week. This is the first time that Munguia is coming off of a loss. He was undefeated going into the Canelo Alvarez fight. That sort of a thing can change some people, right? We have seen, and more often in MMA than in boxing, but boxing for a long time traditionally has not been a sport that has treated losses overly well. So that there could still be some concern there. And we had talked coming out of that fight, Munguia against Canelo, that this was, if Munguia had fought that way against anybody else, then he himself would have fought, or he would have beat them. He just happened to be facing one of the best in the world that night, and that caused some problems for him. And so that's you can take a lot of comfort in, like, okay, I lost against the best. shit happens. What do you do? But I do also think there is a humbling experience that comes with that. And so that would be my concern with Munguia going into this fight, is how does he respond? Because again, should, all due respect, mop the floor with this cat here on Friday night on ESPN. And then we get into the heavyweight boxing preview, as it is Dubois against Joshua. Interesting fight. Sakuragi himself in the chat says AJ by 8th round stoppage. I don't know. Like, so much of this points to Joshua winning. He is again, not minus 1,400, but he's a sizable favorite against Dubois here. He has won 4 in a row. He KO'd 2 of the last 4. One of them was Francis Ngannou, who I have a lot of respect for, but just didn't do it. What wasn't on that level on that night. And so that is a concern there for sure. And like the other guy, like the Otto Wallin and all that, I don't take it a whole lot seriously with Joshua. For Dubois, back-to-back KOs after a loss to Usyk. His last 12 wins have been by knockout. There is just, after the Ruiz fight, and even after he gets that win back, I still view that as Ruiz kind of enjoying the fruits of celebrity a little bit too much, more than Joshua being this dynamic fighter who was able to get it back on track, and then Usyk just stormed through him, which Usyk does to most. But I've just seen too many times now where Joshua has come up in big spots and failed. And I really think a lot of Dubois. And so, Sakuragi, feels like we'd get along really well. We have been getting along really well. There's a vibe going on here. I'm going to disagree. I think Dubois wins this fight. I think Dubois gets the knockout. I think he gets it done. And so my official pick here is Dubois to win straight up at plus 300 and Dubois by KO at plus 450. Okay, we had another UFC question here from Sakuragi before we bounce. Again, almost 2 hours on this thing. So thank you guys for hanging out. It has been a lot of fun hanging out with all of you guys so far here today. Zhang Wei Li, I believe, is who we are asking who should be up next. It, like, perpetually should be Tatiana Suarez. Suarez is such a good fighter and such a talented fighter. She just has not been able to stay healthy. Coming off of a win against Jessica Andrade over a year ago now, August 2023. She is scheduled to have a fight again coming up here in December. After that, just give it to her. Just do it. She should get the next title shot, or she should get a title shot. I think she has been the best in the sport for a really long time. And then aside from that, like, there isn't really an option out there for Zhang. So as you mentioned, like, could we do a champion versus champion fight? You absolutely could. I do think Fiorot deserves a title opportunity, and so to bypass her would be a little bit shitty. But I do think that because there isn't really that next one here in women's strawweight, there's an opportunity to maybe do a champion versus champion bout and go about it that way. So that certainly would be interesting, and a good call there, Sakuragi. All right, again, you guys have been a blast. Thank you guys so much for this today. We got a few subs. That was so much fun to see. We are now over 100 for Twitch here. I greatly appreciate that. When does the good old Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight occur? That's in November. It's the Taylor Serrano fight around these parts. I don't like talking about Jake Paul all that much. But yes, that is in November. But yes, winding down here. You guys have been great. Thank you, all of you, so much for hanging out. Crash Andrews for bringing a whole bunch of people to the party, and for those of you that stayed for like almost 2 hours. I greatly appreciate it. If you missed anything, or if you just really enjoyed this, I have a podcast called Couch Potato Diary. Daily episodes coming out there. Also, the videos go up on YouTube, youtube.com/@CouchPotatoDiary, because we still haven't got that one up to the point where I can have ads out of there yet. But just search Couch Potato Diary and all the stuff is up there, and we kind of break it all up into the different segments. I play video games on here a couple times a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. And also, we are live, doing this podcast thing here live, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. 4 days a week, we are live. And if there's big things happening, we'll probably throw a Thursday one in there as well. So you can follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein. Thank you all for the follow. Sakuragi, top 10 all-time greatest boxing fights. That is one I'm going to have to think on, but that sounds like a chat for next week. So hopefully you come back next week, and we'll see if we can work some top 10 boxing lists onto there. But yes, thank you guys so much. Love chatting with all of you. Love doing these live, and we'll do it again next week. Talk to you all on Monday. I'm out.